Hello there, I am Man in Yellow and welcome to the first video in a series I'm planning to make where we'll go over many of the strategies, game plans or lineups in the game, whatever you want to call them. The point of these videos will be to go over many of the strategies and showcase some games with them while I also talk over them and kind of explain what they're doing, why it's good and stuff like that. This first one will be a bit different from the future videos because many of the game plans I will be talking about are very specific in what they do. They have like a couple core phobies which you build the rest of the team around, and they are like the important thing in your game plan. This first one is a bit different because it doesn't have a specific core phobia. Instead, it kind of just has the same kind of thing that it wants to do. You could kind of argue that it's multiple game plans rather than just one, but I'm gonna put them together as if it's one because they very much do the same kind of thing a lot of the time. They have the same like base idea of what you want to do. The one we are going to be looking at is what I have chosen to call the flexible turret game plan. It doesn't really have a name, so this is just what I've chosen to call it. I don't think there's any actual name for the different strategies or anything like that, so I'm just gonna make that up. But this first one is one where we use turrets a lot. For anyone who doesn't know what a turret is, it is a 1 movement, 2 range phobia that usually has very good stats, and you kind of use those to take control of the board with. The very common ones that you see are Stabby, Bombangles and Unicorn, which are these phobias. They are all very good at taking control of the board early on small maps because they are high stat phobias compared to their cost, and they have a fairly large like damage zone because they can hit everything around them twice in a 2 tile area since they have 2 range. That gives you a lot of like space on the map where the opponent cannot walk over without being hit for free. At the same time, they are, like I said, also very tanky, so they can hold the ground themselves. They won't just get overwhelmed by the opponent. Other than Stabby, Bomangles and Unicorn, you can also use some of the other turrets. For example, Snappy, Unbearable or Giggles are also fine to use if they suit your situation or the game plan you are playing. Kind of depends on the map and what the opponent is doing and stuff like that, and what you want to be doing later in the game. Other than these turrets, there's a very large range of other phobias you can use alongside them that all work well with the turrets. A good example could be the Inoculus up here. This is a very common one, especially with the Unicorn. It's paired very often. This is a 4 key that has 1 movement too, but it has 3 range and like not that much health, but a decent amount of attack. And you use this to essentially just bully the opponent from a distance where they can't reach you, but you can reach them, so you just hit them for free. At least that's the idea with it. You can also have it sit behind a turret where it's very safe, and if the opponent ever walks up to your turret, you can hit with a lot of phobias at the same time, because this doesn't take up a spot where you would otherwise want to place a phobia. So Inoculus works very well with them, and it's very commonly seen with them. Other than Inoculus, these phobias down here are also very commonly seen in turret game plans. These are like those are the main variations of it, and then outside of those there is also one more kind of, and then there's a lot of like kind of side grades to it, but these are very commonly used with them. The Klepto and Hematic are just very large 2 movement, 2 range phobias with AoE attacks. The Hematic has a bit more stats but only gets 1 AoE attack, which deals a little bit more damage, whereas the Klepto has slightly less stats but it gets constant AoE attacks. So they each have their like upside, and Klepto is also a lobber, so they each have their upside which you can play for depending on the map and situation. And then there's a Tractor, which is like a Inoculus, except its ability has an AoE pull, so you can use this to threaten enemies from a distance and try to pull them into your phobias, where you are going to have a very good time because you are using a bunch of turrets, and turrets fight enemies very well. So pulling the opponents towards you and just fighting them straight up is usually very good for you. Other than those, we have a very large amount of support phobias. These are phobias such as the Shovel and Gravedigger, Cupcake, Gonzo Bonzo here, and okay, didn't want to draw for some reason. Gonzo Bonzo and Clinico. These are all very good support phobies that work well with this team. Boom too, to some degree, I guess. It's also kind of a support phobie. And they all synergize very well with the team. The shovel up here is very good because you can push one of your own phobies with this one, and that will move them forward so that you can hit an enemy and then you can return again, or you can just double hit them and maybe kill them. So it's very, very good for bullying the opponent. It makes Attractor way more scary, and you can also use it with something like Klepto to either get free hits or threaten a double hit with AoE to deal a ton of damage to the opponent. Then we have Gravedigger, which is a fantastic support phobie for this kind of game plan, because you can remove obstacles on your side of the maps, which will make it easier to move around with all of these slow phobies that you are playing, because otherwise sometimes you get stuck and you can't really move them around because of the one movement. It can also be used to block enemies in, or you can create blocks which you can hit with your AoE attacks. There's a lot of good uses for it. Then we have the Cupcake and the Gonzo Bonzo, which are both buffing phobies. You use those to empower your other phobies so that you can deal a lot of damage in one turn and kind of like kill one specific or several enemy phobies. They also work very well with the AoE phobies down here, especially the Klepto, because if you get 2 hits with the Klepto, that is very, very scary. So you can, in theory, use the shovel to push your Klepto forward, then you can buff the Klepto and hit an enemy twice for a very large amount of damage, which will splash onto other enemies that stand near them. This can also be used as like a hard rushing thing and stuff like that. There's a lot of uses for buffing your phobies. Then we have Firkin, which is a phobie that you can use to turn an enemy ability off. Sometimes this can be very, very devastating for the opponent. You could turn something like a Mildred off and then go in, and they will have no way of fighting you. You can turn an Attractor off and then move up to them so that they can't pull you in. There's like so many uses for this thing that it almost always finds something good to do. We have Clinico, which is just a very basic healer. This can be very good later in the game, especially during like the endgame stages, because you can just keep your phobies healthy while the opponent is slowly losing health from like fighting or getting poked and stuff like that. So that can also be a good support phobia. And then lastly, the Boom just exists to be like a zoning tool. You place this behind your stabby or your bomangles early on, and then if the opponent has no lobber or some kind of AoE to kill this Boom, they kind of can't go near you because they are going to get hit by the Boom and it will deal a very large amount of AoE damage to them. Other than those, there are also a couple phobies such as Ginsting, Cassowary and Creep, which can be used for playing a bit of a faster game plan if you need to respond to your opponent if they are going very fast. You're kind of starting to go over into another kind of game plan if you use a lot of those phobies, because then maybe you're playing something a bit more aggressive, but they could also be useful in this sort of strategy. This is generally speaking more of a control strategy than it is a like hardware strategy though, or just a fighting strategy. We also have Takedown here, which is just a good combination with both Gravedigger and Le Shovel, and it can also just be good for diseasing opponents so that they are forced to fight you. That's mainly what you use that one for. But those are all of the phobies in here. And like I said, you don't really use a specific thing here. Your game plan could be something like going for the stabby and then bringing the Gonzo behind it with something else, maybe a Klepto, and then you just don't bring any Innoculus or Attractor. It could also be that you bring both Innoculus and Attractor, or you could bring just Attractor and no Innoculus. There's a lot of variation in it depending on the map and what you kind of want to do later in the game. Just to give an example of one of the ways you could build this up, I have an example here where this is just a very basic lineup, and I've included both a version with Attractor and one with Klepto. This is a lineup where you would use this turret strategy and you are using either Bomangles or Stabby, and you are using either Klepto or Attractor depending on which one you are playing for. If you use the Attractor and Innoculus together, then you probably don't want Bomangles, because then you would have 3 mechanicals and that's a little bit too much, so then you would use the Stabby. Similarly, if you choose the Kleptos, then maybe you should go for the Bomangles just to balance which races you are playing with. You can also see there are some key costs here, so you have 5 keys left over after you have like played all of these phobies, which you can use for other support phobies, or you could upgrade one of these phobies. For example, you could turn the Inoculus into a Oopsie Baby instead, so you just bang for one more turn and then you bring Oopsie Baby. Or you could bring something totally different. Maybe you bring the Glob in the later stages of the game to kill an enemy, or something like that. There's a lot of other things you could do. You could also bring Bluelian if you want healing spars and things like that. Really depends on what the opponent is doing. Those 5 keys are kind of like made for you to be able to do other things. But yeah, this is a version of the game plan you could be playing. You could also use the other 5 keys for the Gonzo Bonzo or Cupcake, for example. But this is just like an example of what you could do. You have 24 keys on a small map if you're going first, 25 if you're going second. So you can easily do a lineup like this, where you go for either Stabby or Mangles early on, then you followed up with Unicorn into Inoculus, and you're pretty happy with your early game. Then you either just bring a Tractor, or you bring the Shovel into a Klepto or a Tractor, and that can be pretty good. You could also, if you didn't want the Inoculus in here, you could just skip that one and instead go for Unicorn into maybe like a 4 key of some form. Other than this, it could be Gonzo Bonzo. You could also have gone Gravedigger with a 1 key, and then you could go for a Tractor after 1 turn of banking and kind of take the game from there. There's a lot of like variations in what you can do. You could also play something else instead of the Klepto as your AoE phobie. You could like maybe use an Erratic or something like that. We will see that in an example of one of the games we are going to go into later here. But just know there's a lot of different paths to playing this strategy. That's kind of what I'm getting to here. And they all kind of have the same idea. You are bringing turrets early on, you're taking control of the maps, then you either bring range or AoE and you bully your opponent with those. That's kind of the idea behind it all. Also within this strategy, a Tractor works very well with Unicorn because traps are very scary to step into and you can kind of pull the opponent into traps. So those work well together. Now we're just going to go in and look at some of these strategies. I believe I have them somewhere in here. I should probably have, I should probably have made sure that they were starred, but I don't think I've done that. This is one of them. This is one where I use a strategy where I don't bring Klepto or a Tractor. Instead, I just play for like the base good turrets, and then I bring a bunch of support phobies and slightly faster phobies alongside them. I believe I go for a Unicorn with a 1 key opener here, which is a very common opener for this kind of strategy. You could also do a Stabby, but doing this ensures that you have multiple phobies on the board, so you can actually kill enemies and take panic points early on without too much trouble. Here I also bring Gravedigger to destroy this block here. In just a second I will do that. I'll destroy this block so that I can kill their Henrietta. That is very good for me because Gravedigger is already good on this map, since you can place blocks here, here, or here to take points or just to lock the opponent out if you really want to, and that can be really good. This also just makes it easier for me to go down towards my heart, so getting to bring the Gravedigger here is very nice for me. And that's kind of like a variation, I guess you could say, because I'm not doing exactly the one that you saw before, and this one I will not be bringing those larger phobies in. I'll just be using small efficient phobies. Also, since I went for Unicorn with a 1 key early on, I now have 4 keys, so I can bring Inoculus, which is very, very good. Inoculus is very often used in this type of strategy, just because it's a very cheap way of getting 3 range on a fairly sturdy phobie. Although sometimes, like I said before, you skip it just to be able to bring a Tractor or something like that instead. So right now we are kind of just trading back and forth, and they are being very aggressive towards my heart by moving down here with both the Stabby and the, the Murder Wing. And they can also very easily get to my heart with this if they want to. So at this point I kind of have to kill their things, but I also have to figure out a way to stop them from rushing my heart, because otherwise I will eventually die. Like, I still do have a lot of health, so I'm not super concerned at this point, but I do have to stop them sometime, because this is already going to be a fairly large amount of damage to me. Especially since they take 1 more point up here. here you would normally want to bring in another slower phobie. You could see I had saved up 6 keys, so I was kind of planning to go for either a Tractor or a Radic or something like that earlier in the game. But at this point I am so far behind that I kind of have to like defend my heart, so I'm choosing to be a bit more aggressive with my keys here. I'm bringing Spot and then a tank. I'm just taking Misanthrope out because that's the highest health thing I could find, and I'm using that to block it so they can't attack my heart anymore, since I am only at 3000 health now. So you can imagine if I didn't block for my heart here, they would just hit with all of their phobies and then they would take this point with Snowball and I would die. So that's kind of why I'm doing this instead of anything else. I'm trying to force them back, which very obviously worked here. They can't really stay there because they're just going to lose their phobies. You can see they are also playing the same type of game plan, but just with another type of variation. They are using a bit faster phobies, and they are also using Gonzo Bonzo to empower one of their other things here, or at least have the ability to do so. Don't know if they even buff anything, to be honest. But at this point I've kind of stabilized because I have taken 2 points and they can't really take them back. So now I just have to be a little bit aggressive and force them to move forward. I also pull my phobies a bit back here, not because I'm really that scared of getting poked by the Inoculus, but because it makes the opponent want to go in, which is good for me in this case. So this makes them want to move forward to be aggressive towards my heart, because of course if I don't defend correctly here I would just die, so they are going to do this. However, because they do this way, I can very easily kill their Inoculus and then block them out from the heart, which is going to be very good for me. Because then they are just down a lot of keys, they don't have as much power as me anymore. I still have a lot of keys banked, and they can't really hard rush me here because the Gravedigger will put a block in front of my heart, which is another use for the Gravedigger. You can also defend with it. It's a very, very flexible phobie. So at this point the game is pretty much over. They don't really have any way back in. They can't hard rush me. They can't really fight my phobies because I have too much power compared to them. If they actually kill something, then I have 9 keys to spend, so I could summon some super large phobie, like I could put out a Hero 3.0 or a boss here, or even just like a Bacilla or something very high statted, and they would really not have any way of coming back. I believe I just take a Mr. Trambles to have something very fast here. Or maybe it was a Rambolina. It was some 3 movement phobie because I wanted to take the point and get close to them so I could end the game fast. Okay, that's just a Mr. Trambles. And at this point the game is obviously over. I'm just going to skip ahead. So now you can see I just kill their phobies and the game ends. I also had a second one of my own matches that I wanted to show. I believe that was one where I used Klepto. It should be this one. In this one I used Klepto to sort of like bully the opponent's phobies and also kill their heart. And this is like the other variation of the strategy. There are like 3 main variations, which is Klepto / Hematic Ginsting, because those 2 are very similar phobies. Then we have Attractor, which is like you pull them into you and you fight. And then we have a version that just use either fast phobies with it or support phobies. That was the one you saw in the last game. This is one where I will be using the Klepto game plan a bit more. In the other one I could have also brought Klepto, but then that would have been like at the end of the game, so it's not really relevant. But you can see again here I open with a Gravedigger because Gravedigger is very, very good on this map. And then I start bringing the turrets and I kind of see what they are doing. They are bringing a Jammerfish, so they are obviously trying to get a lot of keys very quickly so that they can overwhelm me. They have a Furnace Face already, which is a very scary phobie to be up against, because this thing just has infinite health when it's in its own smoke. It creates like a smoke field where it's very, very hard to kill it because it takes 50% less damage. And now I'm already banking for the Klepto because they are not really threatening me early on, so I can do this for free. Instead of bringing like another phobie here, like a Unicorn or whatever, I can just bank and bring something large. I could probably also have brought Attractor here, but I chose Klepto instead because I wanted something where I could actually threaten their heart. And they also haven't brought a Gravedigger on this map, so if I sit down here with the Klepto, it's very, very safe. So that's why I chose Klepto over Attractor in this case. I don't really want to fight them with when they have a Furnace Phase. That's going to likely end up very badly for me. So that's why I brought it. I should probably have put Klepto here just so I could attack them this turn, but it doesn't really matter in this case. And now I bring the Shovel, I believe at least, because that works very well with the Klepto. It can also be used together with the Bowmangles and things like that. And I just bring it in here because this means that if the opponent tries to fight me, I can push the Klepto forward, or if they try to move closer, I can push it forward and I can deal damage to them for free. Could also just double hit them if I really want to fight hard or something like that. I should probably have stayed up here with either my Henrietta or something else also. Here the opponent makes a mistake because they bring this, what's it called? They bring the Kaboom forward, and like you can see, they should probably have used the Furnace Phase ability, because I can just kill this Kaboom right now with my Klepto, and I can stay perfectly safe while doing that because I just move it forward to here and double hit them with the Shovel, which is also what I'm going to do. And then they just lose the Klepto for essentially free, while all of their other phobies are also taking very large amounts of damage. So this is very, very bad for them at this point. Also, I should definitely have sacrificed my Henrietta this turn. I have a very bad habit of not sacrificing 1 keys when I should be doing that. The Henrietta should definitely just have gone over and sat here near them so that they would be forced to kill it. That way I could bring a 6 key again next turn. I didn't do that for some reason. I believe I do it next turn, but I should have done that earlier. But yeah, now they are just having to move away from me because they are taking a bunch of damage from the Klepto, which is dropping AoEs on them. And now I just get to rush their heart. And at this point, it's going to be very hard for them to ever have any chance of winning, because I'm just moving towards their heart while keeping control of the map and spreading out so the hero 2.0 can't push me back. So at this point, I only need a couple more hits on this heart and they will die. Like, it's 2 turns of hitting with the panic points also doing something, and then they will just lose the game. So they are going to try and move forward here, but I can just ignore them and hit the heart if I want to. I could even have like gone for their phobies here, but I didn't really have any reason to do that, because by just going for their heart, I'm guaranteeing that I will win, even though I probably wouldn't lose a fight to them if I just killed their Furnace Phase here and brought a large phobie like a boss. That would probably also have ended the game, but this is just a safer way of doing it. Also think I bring like a 3.0, but at this point it doesn't matter which large phobia I bring, kind of like in the other game, where I brought Mr. Trambles at the end, because the game is essentially already over. Just because my phobies have either hard rushed them or gained so much value that it's hard for them to ever come back from it. Also, I should mention the difference between the... The difference between the Klepto here and the Hematic Ginsting is that the Hematic is kind of better for maps where you don't have a lot of obstacles on, and the Klepto is usually better for maps where there is a lot of obstacles. On this map you could see there was a lot of obstacles, so it's very good to bring it here. That's like the big difference in how you use them most of the time. Now, outside of my own replays here, I also want to like have a couple of replays from some of the other high-ranking players, just because that makes a lot of sense to have. Just so you can see it's not only me doing this stuff or anything like that. You can already kind of see that because like my opponents were also using the same type of strategies, but this is just to showcase it a little bit. This is a version of the strategy that uses the Attractor again, and this is played by Shadowforce, who is one of the best players in the game in my opinion. So I kind of wanted to bring one of their versions in here. What they do here is they just bring the Attractor very early on. I believe they actually do Unicorn with a 1 key into Gravedigger directly into Attractor as their early game thing here, which is very, very good. Also, like there are so many variations of how you use the strategy, so it kind of depends on what you plan on bringing and also the map, like I've said. And here this seems pretty good to do, because now they already have good control of the map. The opponent can't really take the middle point for free because you have so many phobies and range that can hit there. And if they like if they just sit back, you get to bang for your Attractor or your Klepto or whichever large phobia you want to use. You could also use many other phobias such as Noxious or something like that within this strategy depending on the map. For example, on this map there is a lot of stim pads, so AoE phobias like the Noxious would be very good. But we do just see the Attractor here, which is also very, very strong. Attractor is like one of the best phobias in the game still. Certainly in the top 5 phobias in the game. Probably the top 3 depending on who you ask, right? At least for small maps. So this is like a very good lineup to play. And here he or she moves the Attractor over here. This is just so that they can threaten these phobias better, because if it's sitting back here you can't target the Gravedigger, but it can here. Right now you could in theory move onto the stim pad and then also hit with the Attractor for a ton of damage on this phobia. But you can also see that the opponent is also again using the same style of game plan. They're just using the Klepto variation. They are still bringing a turret. Their choice was Snappy here. And then they also still have the Gravedigger for opening up the map. So this is kind of the same idea, except like, as I said, it varies a lot what you do. Could be Klepto, could be Attractor, could just be support phobias, could be another large phobia like a Noxious or even a Flesh Crawler or something like that, depending on what you want to play around. So here Rosarius kills the Unicorn, which is pretty good for them. The problem here is that they will also lose the they will lose their Gravedigger for that, which is 1 key down, and their Klepto will also be taking a lot of damage. So this is kind of where the game starts going very bad for them, because they can't really deal with this Attractor in any way. They are not able to actually kill it here. Even with the attack on the stim pad and the Jar Cannon being out here, that's not enough damage to kill an Attractor, because Attractor has base health of 950 at level 1, which is a lot of health for a like squishy turret thing, at least. So as you can see, it survives with a little bit here. Rosarius then brings Glob. The idea here is probably to use the Glob against the Erratic, or even against the Attractor, maybe just to sit on top of it. If the Glob can sit on the Erratic, it's obviously very good for you, but that's not really realistic when the opponent has a shovel and stuff, but still. Shadowforce now just heals up their Attractor, and then they bring a Finnegan to deal with this Glob in case it ever gets too close. And at that point the game is kind of over. You can also see that the Le Shovel is being used in pretty much all versions of this strategy. Le Shovel is just a fantastic support phobia, only costs 3 keys and it just does so many things, so it's super good. Here they used it to push forward a Gravedigger so that they could get their melee phobia in double hit range. You can also use it with the either Klepto or Attractor to move them forward to be more threatening. They could also have used it with the Erratic here if they wanted to at some point to move it forward and do a lot of AoE damage. There's a lot of different uses for it is what I'm getting at. At this point the game is also basically over, as you can probably guess. Shadowforce is very far ahead with what has happened so far, because the Attractor just kind of took over the game in this case. Also, Erratic is essentially just a slower version of Klepto that can fight mechanicals and also has some leech and a bit more, like, whatever you want to call it, like variation to it. It's like a variation of Klepto essentially for the strategy, except it's good against mechanicals. Now, Rosarius didn't actually have any mechanicals, but it's still pretty good here, just because you get to leech with it, and it also locks the opponent out of maybe bringing their own mechanicals and stuff like that. So there's like some merit to bringing something like that. Also has a bit more health than Klepto, maybe, I think. Can't actually remember Erratic's starting health right now. Can just quickly look that up. Maybe it actually has less health than the Klepto, I can't remember at level 1. No, it has 100 more health than the Klepto at level 1, so it's a little bit tankier, I guess. Like, it's essentially the same idea still. Lastly, we will look at one of Aliengineer's games. He is also an extremely good player. That is something that most players probably know if they've talked with the community. Many people consider him the best player in the game. There's like several people you could argue is the best player in the game though. Like there's a lot of people, so it's up for debate, I guess. Let's see if I can actually find their replay here, because they play so many games that it may have gone away, to be honest. No, it's right there. So it's still here for a little bit more. Alien plays so many games, so sometimes you want to look at one of their replays and then it's just gone. This is another game where you will see the Klepto version of the strategy. However, in this one they are like buffing it and stuff like that, which I didn't do. I just used it as a good lobber. In this one it kind of gets some help with buffers. Can't remember if they actually buff it, but they have the threat of doing that. You can also see instead of the Unicorn opener, they are going for the Stabby. Stabby is way harder to actually fight than Unicorn. It doesn't have the traps, but it has way more health and also a bit more attack power. So it's pretty good. It just depends on, like, if they wanted Innocuous early on here, you should probably go the Unicorn like path and get instead, just because that allows you to bank a key. But if you're not planning to do that, then you can just go for the larger, stronger phobia instead. Do miss out on the traps, but that's not necessarily bad for you as long as you have the heavy phobia. So here Alien just moves aggressively in and kills the Contortio while backing the phobia up, or their phobias up, with a bunch of 1 keys. This makes it very hard for Castley to stay in like range, because if they stay here they are obviously going to die. This is a lot of early game power, so they are forced to move back at this point. They've also definitely put down a trap somewhere here, which I think Aliengineer guesses, if I remember correctly. I think they move the Razormouth back and then take with the Contortio, right? You can see this is like essentially 2 different versions of the strategy fighting against each other. And this is just like the most common thing you can do. I could maybe have like separated this up in 2 different ones where I had Klepto and Attractor as different strategies, but I think they do so much of the same things that they may as well be counted as one type of strategy instead. Also, I'm a bit surprised that Castley just let their Innocuous be killed here, because even if they have a boom behind, it's not really that dangerous because it's only going to hit 1 phobia. And then Alien brings the Klepto here, which is standing in safety behind a wall, being able to lob over at the phobias that Castley has, so this is very scary for them. They also take the point down here just to put even more pressure on. And then we see a Hevo 2.0, which is a fairly fine phobia. I don't really like it that much on small maps most of the time, just because it's so expensive for a large pusher, but it can still be fine. It's sort of like getting a Hematic Gens thing that pushes for 1 more key, in a weird way. It's a bit less damage though, which is important to think about also, compared to the Hematic. But pushes can be very good, like you see here. They get to do a bunch of damage and then push the phobies back so that they aren't threatened by what Alien has. I don't really agree with the snowball, but that's not the point of this video. But you can see here that they are using a bunch of turrets, both of them even, are using turrets with support phobies and then 1 large kind of core phobia. And we also get to see the Clinico here, which is a very good phobia to heal your other phobias in the later stages, just to make sure that you can sustain against the opponent. Here's a bunch of debuffers. Castley is probably thinking, if I debuff all of their stuff, I can maybe win a fight. That's a fairly good thought pattern here, but the problem is that the Bad Omen is just going to die for free, kind of, without really doing anything. And the blue is not really going to be able to debuff multiple phobies either, because you can kill one of these anyway, which you are probably going to. So in this case, it doesn't really matter that much that they have the blue or anything like that. But it was at least like a good thought pattern to try and come back into the game. Sometimes you just gotta hope that the opponent makes a mistake and that you can somehow make it back in the game that way. But at this point, Alien is so ahead that it's gonna be very hard for them to do anything. Because they have essentially infinite sustain and Castle doesn't. Because of the Clinico. They can just like hit them once and then walk out and then heal their Klepto and then walk back in, wait a couple turns and stuff like that, if they want to. Plus Alien is also very far ahead in health. But this is sort of like how you play that strategy. You just bring a heavy turret or some turrets early on to have some very stat heavy phobies that can control the board, and then you bring a win condition after, or you bring supports for those large phobies so that you can fight your opponent, depending on the game state, of course. And that is also what we saw in all of these matches, just different variations of it. And now the game should be over, I believe, because like Alien can either kill their heart or all of their phobies depending on what they want. Doesn't really matter which they choose. Either way, that was pretty much everything I had for this one. Yeah, I've kind of explained a lot of times by now how the strategy works. You can also take either of these and read if you want to. I've made like descriptions for what it is and stuff like that. I'll put them as like links in the description under the video, or you can just pause the video if you're watching it. It's just a description of what I already talked about with the phobies you use and like kind of what they can do and how you use them as win conditions. If I missed anything, or if you have anything you want to ask about, or explain something badly, feel free to leave a comment, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.